Welcome to the Fiercely Visible CEO podcast. I'm your host, Steph Wharton. Join me as we dive into how to become a widely in-demand CEO that prioritizes balance between life and business, isn't afraid of making the scary decisions that get you results you actually care about, and unapologetically breaks the rules to build the business and life of your dreams. Someone inside of my community today, Kelsey, by the way, if you're listening, this is all for you. And I'm sure it's going to apply and help a lot of the rest of you that are tuning in today. Essentially, what Kelsey did is left a comment on my content on Instagram where we were talking about how podcasting can be such a powerful tool to gain more visibility. That's where the conversation was going. And all of a sudden they came back and they're like, hold on a second. Do you have a podcast episode around how to book podcast interviews on other people's podcasts? And I sat there and I'm like, no, I don't. Which felt so ridiculous almost, because I'm all about visibility. I'm all about gaining speaking opportunities through collaborations and through partnering up with other people in the online space, and being somebody who has done their fair share of pitching, whether it's for podcasts, for summits, for other opportunities, and as well as being somebody who has been pitched to a million freaking times. I like to say I have a pretty good handle on what makes a good pitch and what's going to make it so that it's well received and that it's going to increase the chances of whoever you're pitching of saying yes to you. And in this case, of inviting you to then speak and be interviewed on their own platforms, whether that's a podcast or some sort of coaching program container. It could be anywhere. The options are endless, and you get to choose what kind of platform and in which way you want to be featured, and you get a chance to share your knowledge and your journey and your expertise with other people. But at the end of the day, the pitching part of it can apply to a lot of different mediums. Now, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, I'm actually pulling from the content that we share inside of the 5-day podcast launch workshop. Which as I'm saying it, I realize, is this the first time that I'm mentioning this on this podcast? Like, holy shit. Anyway, maybe I've mentioned it before, maybe I haven't. I'm kind of having a little bit of a brain fart right now. But that's the project that we've been working on for the past couple months. And it's all about helping you launch your own podcast. And within one of those days, we talk about what it looks like to grow your podcast after having launched it. And within that, we dive into much more in depth than what we're going to do today. But we dive into how to pitch people to come interview on your podcast. And at the end of the day, the principles can be pretty much interchangeable when it comes to either pitching people to come share their journey and their knowledge on your podcast versus pitching yourself to now be featured on somebody else's podcast, right? We can flip the script, tweak a couple things here and there, and gain the same kind of results. So something that I want to say, and you can probably basically deduce this on your own based on what I've said so far, but my number one tip for you, if you want to land more speaking opportunities on podcasts, etc., is to go ahead and pitch yourself. A lot of the times I see people who feel that they would love to gain more visibility. They would love to put on trainings inside of masterminds, and they would love to be interviewed in the most popular, top-rated podcasts. But our ego gets in the way, and you're just waiting for that invitation, and you're just waiting for the day that either people will recognize you as a leader, as somebody, as a thought leader, as somebody that has something really insightful and different to share, or you believe you already are that person. And to some extent, you believe people do see you as such. But again, you're just waiting for the invitation. And it's like, nah, like, why wait? You could be waiting your entire freaking life. Instead, go ahead and pitch yourself. So when it comes to that, I think it's really cool to be able to put ourselves in the rooms that we want to be in. So if you want to be interviewed in that top rated podcast, take that initiative, raise your hand, suggest that by pitching. And that's when you finally open yourself up to that opportunity, as opposed to just hoping and praying that one day it comes to you. And hey, maybe it will, but perhaps more than likely it will just never magically land on your lap, unless you, of course, build a hella ridiculous reputation for speaking and as a thought leader in your area of expertise, and you have a strong relationship with that other person where you want to be featured in. Then of course, based on that relationship and your reputation, they're going to be more likely to invite you. But pitching yourself is that first step. In terms of what a pitch can look like, some of the things that I've played around with, both with pitching myself and some of the things that I've noticed work really well when people pitch themselves to me, is one, the pitch itself. Before we dive in, I just need to hammer this down a little bit more. You know how hard it is, whether you're a podcast host or you're a coach or service provider that has some sort of group program, membership, mastermind, whatever, where you every now and then, or very consistently, host guests inside of to do interviews or put on trainings or hot seat coaching, whatever. It can be really hard to continuously come up with new guests to bring into that podcast and that coaching program. Like perhaps at first it comes naturally because you know a lot of people and a lot of people that are really well known in their craft. So it kind of flows off the cuff and you're like, oh yes, I know so-and-so that would be great. And they would be able to share this really cool perspective with my community, and it would be an amazing way to provide more value. So you start inviting people, but after a couple months, that pool that you originally had, unless you continuously grow your connections and your network, is going to start dwindling more and more and more. So now to find new people, fresh perspectives, more diverse perspectives, it does come a little bit harder. Even if it's not harder, it can be time consuming, right? To continuously find new people to now share these stories with or through. So by the simple act of pitching yourself, in this case to be interviewed on somebody's podcast, you're already making their life that much easier. Now, I'm not going to pretend here and say that it's likely that people don't even get pitches. No, like if you're pitching yourself to a very top rated and popular podcast, it is very likely that they receive a lot of pitches day in and day out. So now it is your job to figure out a way to stand out in some way, right? So I think that by default, you should be making sure that your pitches, if you're pitching to multiple different platforms at a time, make sure they're different from each other. Don't be copy pasting the same old boring pitch every single time. Not only is it very like ingenuine and not personal, but it's likely going to stand out less, because how many people do you think are doing the exact same thing, sending a boilerplate message, right? So add your personality, add something unique, add something that makes it more worth it for that host to now go ahead and just read it to start with, and then go ahead and say yes, or maybe let's talk about this further. So that pitch, putting yourself in the room and giving people, the hosts, a guest, an idea, that is that first step. Now, when it comes to the pitch itself, something that I personally really, really love is when pitching, actually including a suggestion on what the topic at hand could be. So what do you want to be interviewed about, right? What do you want that guest training to be on? Because yes, putting your name forward does make our lives easier as people who might want to interview somebody or host a training from somebody else. Yes, but you're not making our lives easier if now all of a sudden you put your name forward, but now we got to come up with what we want to ask you and what we want to interview on, right? Like you're the expert, you know what's freaking juicy, and you should be doing your research on the host's audience to figure out what would be valuable and come at it not from a position of, hey, I want to get featured and I want to get more visibility, but come at it from a position of, I want to serve your community and this is going to be freaking impactful and amazing, and I know they're going to love it because XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Like add things that basically Send the message across to the host that you've done your research, you're paying attention, you really care about this interview, not just for the visibility, but because of the community. It's all about serving. It's all about relationships. I've said this a million times before, and I cannot say it enough. Focus on serving and what you can teach. Focus on your legacy, on the impact that you're creating. And sure, you can suggest a topic, or you can perhaps even leave it open, suggest a couple more in case that one isn't the best fit. Like there could be instances where the subject matter that you're pitching, or just your area of expertise in general, it could be something that they've recently already had a guest on. And yeah, if you did your research, you would know that, but perhaps you don't know that because they've already booked that guest speaker. They've done the interview, but they haven't released it yet, right? So by just pitching one sole idea, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're decreasing the chances and the possibilities of them saying yes, because there could be a clash, right? It could have already been done. It could be redundant. So instead, by giving a couple more suggestions, like alternatives, and then leaving it open for quote unquote negotiation, like any other ideas that the host might have, perhaps, now you take that no, sorry, but thank you for the pitch to, oh, maybe, okay, let's explore this further. So now you're lowering the barriers and you're increasing the chances that your pitch is going to get accepted. So anyway, I think that's like enough for now, but really just take that initiative, pitch yourself, suggest a topic that not only lines up with how you want to position yourself as a leader so that it can be very intentional and strategic for you and your exposure, but primarily that's going to give a really cool, fresh perspective, be perhaps impactful, educational, all the good, juicy stuff to the community that you're hoping to now get this exposure in front of. And what I'm going to leave you with is, I know there's going to be a lot of you that are like, okay, cool. Like I now know that I need to pitch and I know roughly how to go about that pitch. But what if they say no? Like, oh, you probably have this like pit in your stomach and you're like, I don't want to get rejected. Like it's bad enough getting rejected through clients. Now I got to get rejected by other people too, that I'm not even trying to work with. I'm just going to get featured and like share my like genius. Like, oh my goodness. Which I get, like I understand, don't get me wrong, like I pitched myself recently and I'm still waiting to hear back on that, and every couple days I think about it and I'm like, oh, and like I don't literally cry, but like fake tear rolling down the side of my face, and I'm like, I hope they say yes. Like what if they say no? That's gonna be such a bummer. And yeah, it requires a little bit of inner work, it requires a little bit of reframing, but at the end of the day, if you're not pitching yourself, it's gonna be a no. So the least you can do for yourself is not hold yourself back, is not self-sabotage before you can even give people the opportunity to say yes or no, right? Like the worst thing that you can do is say no to yourself. So just pitch yourself. And if they say no, understand that that no has nothing to do with you. It is not a reflection of who you are, of what you know, of what you're capable of. It is just a reflection of them and their platform, that perhaps right now, the topic that you're hoping to speak on is just not a good fit, or it's already been done, or doesn't align with how they want to steer their podcast on a go forward basis. And that's okay. There is literally nothing wrong with that. Like I've had people pitch me right now to speak on my podcast. And unfortunately, right now, my podcast is a solo podcast. That may very well change in the future. But me saying no right now has nothing to do with the people that are pitching themselves. If anything, all the power to you, like the confidence that shines through when you believe so strongly in your message and what you want to share with the world is so freaking inspiring and amazing in itself, that leaves a mark even with the host. It's like, cool, like good on you. Like that's a really cool topic, or I love the passion that you have behind it. But the no, I'll say this once more, it is not a reflection of you as a leader, as a human being, and it is not a reflection of your business and your worth. It is just a no. So you move on, you cross that name off your list, that podcast that was not a hell yes, and you move on to the next one and you pitch yourself again. and you get back up and you pitch yourself again. And all of a sudden, you're going to be getting all the freaking hell yeses, and you're going to start getting featured on more and more podcasts. And that in itself is going to build such a solid reputation, and it's going to make it easier and easier to get the bigger and better and sexier opportunities in terms of visibility, getting featured and speaking and being able to impact the world on a larger scale. That's it for this week's episode of the Fiercely Visible CEO podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at @StephWharton_ for more valuable content. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts.